Hello, I'm Dr. Norman Wood of Elevated Safety Systems, and I'm wearing the Rescue 1 Emergency Descent System harness. It is the most advanced hunting harness in the world, and I'll demonstrate it for you shortly. I'm always connected from the time I leave the ground until the time I get back down whenever I'm in my tree stand. Each year, we lose hunters to injuries and deaths from hunting out of a tree stand. 30% of all hunters will fall at least once in their lifetime. A lot of hunters refuse to wear a safety harness because they're afraid they're going to be suspended and die that way. I understand all of those issues, but they're no longer legitimate. A little over 20 years ago, I fell out of a tree. I fell over 20 feet, fractured my pelvis in 2 places, shattered my left arm. I was by myself. I had to drag myself almost 100 yards to get on my four-wheeler when I couldn't move anything from my waist down. That was the hardest thing I think I've ever had to do in my life, was get on that four-wheeler. I made it back to my cabin. I called the operator and told him to come and get me. They took me to the trauma center where I worked. And I was in the intensive care unit for almost 2 weeks, had to have surgery, then up on the floor of the hospital. And they finally sent me home in an ambulance to my brother's house where he had put in a hospital bed. That was the most miserable time of my life. I could not walk for almost 4 months without assistance. Had to teach myself how to walk again. And during that convalescence, I started researching safety harnesses. And I discovered that all of the safety harnesses do exactly the same thing. They prevent you from hitting the ground. That's what they're designed to do, and most of them do a very good job of that. But during my research, I also discovered this phenomenon called suspension trauma. And that is what happens to the body when you're suspended in a harness. And I discovered through my research that you cannot be suspended for much more than 15 or 30 minutes. That most people become symptomatic, which means they have a very fast heart rate. Their heart will pound out of their chest. They get short of breath. They become nauseated. And they become pre-syncable, which means they're just getting ready to become unconscious. Most people will have those symptoms within 15 minutes. In all of my engineering of this harness, I have been suspended thousands of times. And I have timed myself to where I become symptomatic, and it is 12 minutes. I may be able to make 15 minutes, but I'm never going to bet my life on it. So being suspended in a harness and keeping yourself from hitting the ground is only one problem that you have. And every year there's hunters that fall out of their tree stand, and they're able to get back up on their tree stand if they keep their harness tether strap up high enough, the anchor strap. But sometimes hunters fall out of their tree stands and they're not able to recover back to the platform. And that's when you're really in really dangerous conditions. You don't have a whole lot of time, 15 to 30 minutes. You can die suspended in a harness in less time than it takes you to walk out of the woods. So in my designs, I just started designing descending capabilities within my harness. And it took me 3 years to get the first one to work. And now, after almost 15 years of research and design and testing, I have by far the most advanced hunting harness on the market. And this harness will allow you to descend up to 34 feet. I also designed in this harness that if for some reason that you're not able to use the descending component, that you can still survive suspended in my harness. On the back side, here on behind the D-ring, this red strap is the suspension release strap. When you're suspended in a harness, especially a rear attached safety harness, the leg straps act as giant tourniquets on the blood flow returning from the legs back to the heart, brain, and the lungs. It's like in the hospital when we put a rubber strap on your arm when we're drawing blood. That stops the venous return back up to the heart. Well, these leg straps, when you're suspended in the harness, do exactly the same thing. And within just a matter of minutes, your legs will fill up with blood. and it does not return to the heart and the lungs and the brain for circulation, and that's what causes the problems. Your legs can hold up to half of your total blood volume. That is like cutting both of your wrists and bleeding out half of your blood and trying to survive that way. Nobody can. So you have to be able to get the pressure off of those leg straps, off of the femoral vein in your groin. And there's only two ways to do that. One way, you have to get back up on your feet standing, either on your stand or on the ground, or you have to be standing in a suspension relief strap. Also, on my harness, I have designed a butt seat strap, which I call the Vaniel strap, and it's named after Drew Vaniel, who was a young man that died in Alabama a few years ago while deer hunting near his home. He fell out of his tree stand and was suspended in his harness, and the young boy died that way. He was trying to make his harness into a set harness. He tried to move his leg straps down to where he could get more comfortable in that harness, but with the rear attached safety harness, you can't do that, and the suspension trauma will still occur and you can still die as he did. So I designed a butt seat strap on the back of the harness, and it's held in place with Velcro. And if you do fall, and if you're suspended, and if you cannot use the descending component of the harness for whatever reason, I mean, accidents happen, things happen, I like double safety precautions and triple. And if you're standing in your suspension relief strap that you would have to deploy once you fell, if you're not able to use the descending component, and then once you're standing in that suspension relief strap, you can pull the Vaniel seat down and you can actually sit down in your harness to rest your legs. The blood flow is better if you're standing and if you're moving your legs. But if you're seated in that Vaniel seat, as long as you're moving your legs, the muscle contractions is what moves that blood out of your legs back up to the heart, so you will not be as susceptible to suspension trauma. You never want to hang suspended in a safety harness any longer than you absolutely have to. You must get to the ground as quickly as possible or back to the platform in a standing position to get the pressure of those leg straps off of your groin. That is the reason I designed the Rescue One Emergency Descent System harness, so you could rapidly and safely get yourself to the ground. The redundant safety features that I have built into this harness, which I will show as well, but you should never have to use them. In actuality, you should be able to get yourself to the ground very quickly. Now this is the suspension relief strap, and it's right behind the D-ring. You pull it out of a storage compartment, and you will drape it in front of you between your knees and your feet, and you will tie it to the other D-ring on the opposite side. And now I stood up in the suspension release strap. I no longer have all the pressure in my groin from the leg straps. And once I'm standing in the suspension release strap, you want to move your legs, and that's what pumps the blood out of your legs back up into your heart, your lungs, and your brain. And while you're suspended, you can actually loosen up your leg straps if you need to a little bit, but also if you get tired, you reach behind and you free up the Vaniel seat, and you can sit down and actually sit down, and I can raise my feet if I get tired. Stand back up. You can move your legs to pump the blood out of your legs back up into your heart and your lungs. If you get tired, you can sit down in the Vaniel seat. But you shouldn't have to use that. I'm just going to move that out of the way. You pull down on the brake handle pouch, and it has the instructions underneath here if you can't remember how to do it. What it says is to pull on this red brake handle, pull it all the way down as far as you can towards your feet, and that has pulled the pin in the back, And when I loosen up on that, it'll allow the line to transition up through the harness. And you may have to bounce just a little bit to get that line started. And you can stop yourself any place you want all the way to the ground. And it doesn't take much pressure. So I'm now safely back down on the ground, faster than somebody could call 911 on their cell phone.